Hi, this video is going to be a reply to Hythloday, but also before that, just a general reply to this strain of comments, which has been, why use the word spiritual for this? Well, I think it'd be kind of hard to describe this feeling from scratch, given that people have it in all different kinds of circumstances, given that sometimes people have a reaction that where they do great, wonderful, positive things, and then other people have a reaction where they do terrible, disgusting things. And we have 10,000 years of experiences in this extension, you can look it up, extension versus intention, of the term spiritual experience. We have all of these thousands of years of experiences that we have identified and put in this extension. And just real quick, this is related to a method I have of analysis of terms. That's part of relativistic skepticism called extensional analysis. And the extension of a term are all the things that are supposedly, allegedly identified by the term. And the intension is more like the dictionary definition, right? Like a formulaic description that helps you identify things that ought to be in that group, or something that, is a statement of what unites everything in that group. What do they have in common? How to identify them, and possibly something more essential than just identification. But it basically comes back to identification. So we have this, extant set, and that's what I want to talk about. And it already has a word, spiritual experiences. So that's the subject matter. Okay, now Hythloday's question. One, he talked about this feeling of powerful knowing, or a feeling lucky when you play these games where you just choose a briefcase and, oh, this one's going to be good, it's going to have a lot of money in it. Is that the spiritual feeling or similar to it? And I would say no. Now, given that when you have emotional states, we're parallel processing machines. We seem to have multiple simultaneous states, so you could have one feeling motivating it that causes another feeling, and we have feelings like hunger that we know fire off, and we feel hungry when we don't really need to eat. So, in an individual case, various feelings could be pulled in, but I don't think a feeling lucky, which is a feeling that I've had when you gamble, you can encounter and study that feeling. And I've done a very similar thing. I've looked at the situations when I felt lucky. And it's not the same as the spiritual feeling. Spiritual feeling is more of, to me, what seems to be consistent for me, and it looks like it's in other people's spiritual experiences, is sort of feeling like there's a meaning, a greater meaning, that there's a big picture to the world, and that big picture has some sort of meaning. And as I've said all along, I'm not saying it's not an illusion. Feelings generally give us illusions, and you can study those illusions to find out what the motivating factor, what the biological imperative might be. And I think when you have a spiritual experience, it's more of it tends to be a long-term, bigger picture, a feeling of grasping a greater meaning and how things fit together. And I don't think that, I think that people want that money, and they're there, and they have to trump up some sort of a decision. They may call on some spiritual sense to try to have some confidence in their choice, but no, I would not consider that a spiritual feeling. Of course, I'm saying these are just brain states, but brain states are important. It's what we're actually reasoning about. And you were talking about why do I elevate this feeling over love or anger or pain? And I don't. I think all of those should be studied. And I've mentioned that this is a method of studying any emotion, is to look at what experience you're having while you feel that emotion, to a lesser degree, what the experience was that led to it, and that it led to. And I believe we, as a society, have done this with things like hunger and anger and pain. I think we have understood why biologically there's pain, and we understand fight or flight. And we learned a lot about anger to see how closely related it is to fear. And I think it helps us handle things like anger better, knowing that sort of thing. So of course they're brain states, but the idea that you can ignore what emotions you're having, what feelings that are washing through you, and that would be rationality, that's a delusion. If you're going to pretend you aren't having those feelings so that you could be rational, you're delusional, because you are making decisions from within this emotional environment, including in intellectualism, where you've got feelings like eureka, I found it, and the feeling of curiosity, right? And you could study the feeling of curiosity the same way, and I have. This is how I have tried in my life to understand myself, to know thyself, as Socrates would tell us to do. I have looked at what's going on when I'm having those feelings, and I've studied those experiences and come up with what do they have in common. And I've noticed with from gambling that feeling lucky doesn't seem to go with being lucky. Though it is odd, because there are this feeling that you're on a streak, and but it's always random when it ends. So if you looked at what's the source of that feeling biologically, I think it is counter-rational. It's like, wow, there's got pluses and minuses and cons and pros, and what am I going to do? Well, you got to just roll the dice at some point, and a body that can feel lucky arbitrarily, and it has found a way to make a decision that their rational mind was stuck on, right? And I don't think that's what's going on with spiritual feelings. It's not just a feeling of being lucky. You also use an example of your awe of mathematical beauty. Now, I might be biased because this is one of the things that I've had spiritual feelings about. As a matter of fact, I kind of had one just the other day. You might be interested in this. Just yesterday, I was trying to get my brain going on the program, and I just couldn't quite do it. And so I was thinking of other things, and I was thinking, what's the equation of a sine wave in polar coordinates? So I figured it out. And I found out it's a very interesting equation where you cannot isolate either r or theta. Neither the radius nor the angle can be isolated, right? So if you take y equals sine over x and you plug in and turn it into polar, so that you get an equation in terms of r and theta, it turns out you got things stuck inside the tangent and whatnot. You cannot isolate those variables. The only way, and then I was researching it, and then sure enough, the only way to find out what solves it would be to plug in random numbers and see if they solve it. So that's kind of interesting to me, and realizations like that make me go, oh, in a big picture way, with a feeling that is akin to a spiritual feeling. Now, whether it really was or full-blown, well, that will take understanding this feeling a little better, right? Like, was I really angry, or was I just nervous? Or, it could be subtle to figure out questions like that. But it has a certain similarity to me. And my love of mathematics and mathematical patterns has never been that now I have a final understanding. It's always been a sense of wonder at how big and complex. It's kind of how amazing the characteristics of a fractal are. They seem to stretch into the universe, right? And yet they all fit together, one next to the other, and that is akin to spirituality. So I would say yes, and I would say that feeling of awe, since you think the word spiritual has to do with spirits and ghosts and stuff, that you're not going to call that a spiritual feeling. And I don't think the feeling of awe is equivalent to the spiritual feeling. I think the spiritual feeling brings this other feeling of awe that many things can bring. But they do seem closely related, and I think the fact that you got out of the coal mines and and pursued mathematics, that's similar to what I'm saying, is to listen to this. If that was a spiritual feeling, I'd be saying, yeah, well, listen to it, and maybe change your life, you know, to pursue that. Because if that's going to make you feel that way, it's going to make, at the very least, it's going to make life more bearable for you. And I actually think, by my definition, you are a spiritual person, probably. It's funny that you segued into ESP in that very same question, and I don't see how that's like mathematical beauty. Yeah, I don't believe in ESP. There is no extrasensory perception. However, we have a lot of subtle senses, and there's a lot of things that can be deduced by a brain from the senses, the mundane five senses and all these other emotions and feelings, right? Like, I think of hunger as a sense. It's not as directly hooked to the world as five senses, but taste is kind of a weird sense too. I mean, it's a lot harder to order flavors in our mind than it is colors, even though red and blue are very distinct. It's kind of easier to organize those into a spectrum of colors and related colors compared to taste. And so something like hunger, similar. It's more removed from reality even than taste is. It's less direct than sense of hearing. But that would not be extrasensory. If you could get information from that would be sensory perception, wouldn't it? So yeah, I'm not a dualist at all. So you ask, why should I attach value to it? And it's like, I think it's not me attaching value. It's like, understanding love's been important because whole empires have fallen because of it. It's affected a lot of people that weren't the ones involved in the love affair. Spirituality has had an effect, a huge effect on culture. And I'm perfectly open to what we find out in this finally cures us of any need. Maybe it is a feeling we start to avoid entirely. But in my experience, it's been the opposite. It has been a feeling that helps me make sense of the world and what's going on and my place in it. It's a feeling that led me to realize I have to be politically active, or else I'm contradicting the big meaning of things. My assessment of how things should be compared to how they are is one thing. That could be done rationally. But the motivation to actually do anything about it, especially given that part of my rationality is that, it might be unsolvable, is this sense of right and wrong that I get from a big picture of having paid attention to my own experiences when I feel this spiritual feeling that feels like a deep connection to how things are well around and well beyond me. So I think I have described the feeling now a bit, and one of the difficulties in describing it is people can have these spiritual experiences in all different ways. A lot of people don't get it from thinking about conic sections. Like, I have ruminated. I know I've had a spiritual experience, or what I would call a spiritual experience, meaning I've had this feeling contemplating conic sections, because people were just looking into those originally way back when in antiquity for fun. And then it turns out that those are the fundamental shapes that you can have in two-body gravitational interactions. That's fucking amazing. It makes things seem like they fit together in surprising ways. You don't sometimes find out for 1,000 years, and people are just investigating that out of their own interest. And they back then tend to have spiritual attitudes about their number theory, and then lo and behold, it becomes relevant to something as concrete as mechanics. So I think my description is just that because people have it at all different kinds of experiences going on, and because I think sometimes it leads people to do good things and bad things, that it's hard to describe the feeling directly. But it is sort of a feeling of of knowing how things, feeling like you know how things work in a big picture, and even the unknown parts somehow fit together, and sort of it's like, you know what, it's like being able to grasp the gestalt and look, gaze right on it, and feel how all the infinite complexity of things that we're faced with fit together, right? It's like maybe that means, I don't know, I'm just speculating, maybe that means it's the balance to this reductionism. Like, one way to understand how things work is to break them down into parts. One way to understand the forest is to say, oh, well, it's this tree after tree after tree, and then there's grass, and it's just, you know, fallen tree, and, you know, and breaking it down into parts. And then what's the tree made of? Bark and, you know, sap, and you break things down. And maybe the spiritual feeling is just the reintegration of all the parts, is a feeling that we have when visualizing the reintegration of all the parts. So I don't think it's just me that feels that it's important. I have found that they are really the most important experiences of my life, and they can lead you astray, they can drive you insane, fire can burn, but I don't think it's me that's making it important. I think it's pretty damn obvious looking around in the world. It's pretty fucking important. We're in the 21st century, and for some reason most people are afraid to not associate with a religion, with an organized religion. And so I think that the people having spiritual experiences and starting those and keeping those religions going are, well, as I said, I think they're subverting the natural course of of our human interaction with this feeling. But it's damn clear it's powerful, right? It needs to be understood. We aren't going to just understand it by ignoring it. No, I'm not a big fan of YouTube atheism. This is one of the things I was excited to see, is that people were engaging with this other spiritual, momentum that we have from the past, from our past misapprehension of what those feelings are really about, I think. And it's not just this feeling. And when you say feelings are just a brain state, all thought is just a brain state. Okay, so to become a better thinker, you have to understand brain states. It's not like you get to ignore certain brain states and suddenly become really, really well informed from the ignorance, right? And it's also not just this feeling. I have done this with many feelings. Any feeling that is recurrent enough and influential in my life, recurrent enough to notice, and seems influential in my life, which merely recurring enough to notice is influential enough, really. I have gone through and done this to some degree. But the spiritual feeling, like feelings of love, is a particularly powerful one. I think it requires a lot of attention. And I think that each and every person finds different moments to be the spiritual ones. And in general, I think people should investigate those things. They might find when they really do it that that thinking about it created a spiritual feeling, but doing it doesn't. And I think people should question that. And as I also said, I think people should stay tethered. I think this is probably one of the purposes of natural philosophy for me, is to stay tethered. So, you know, to have a morality. So if I had a spiritual feeling that told me to do something immoral, I would simply interpret that as ill health on my part, and, you know, and not do it. But given that filter, given the ability to inhibit certain kinds of reactions, if you have a spiritual feeling when you surf, I think you should probably do some surfing, see if that persists. If you have a spiritual feeling when you're solving complex mathematical problems, then I think that you should probably do some complex mathematical problems and see if that persists. And if the feeling does persist, I think you'll find that perhaps spirituality is just, you know, an eye on your own mind. Maybe it just knows what makes you tick and what it would take for you to be happy. And sometimes maybe those are impossible and negative things. And DNA is just such a cruel, master that's like, yeah, but try it. Let's see how it works out, and then you get the lesson of, oh, that was impossible, or, oh, I was stopped by people that didn't appreciate what I thought, I needed to do. And yet, it's not really about happiness, because obviously the feeling does not concord with happiness directly, but there is a satisfaction of pursuing these things that give you this kind of a spiritual feeling, and sort of allow you to draw energy from your general energy store to act in accordance, for example, to do the hard work of going to school, to learn about something that has sparked you in that way. So you also talked about the etymology of words, and you said, this was Gary is saying, is that a word means what other people say it means. Well, okay, first of all, some people use the word spirit the way I've just told you about. And how did it come to mean something different? Is because people insist that, no, it means this other thing. Here's what it is. Here's how I feel. This, the word skepticism comes from the word to reflect. Now people think it means doubt. Well, in philosophy, we're in a multi-thousand-year conversation, and we're constructing words. Plus, I am a programmer. I create new things for which there is no particular word, and I have to borrow words and create a technical language all the time. And when you are doing development and concepts, you need new words. In mathematics, when a mathematician actually develops a new concept, they apply a word. Often it's a word that has a different meaning outside of mathematics. It's just similar enough for them to start sculpting the particular meaning that they mean. And in this case, I don't even think that's what's going on. I think this is, you are an atheist, right? So don't tell me spirituality is about ghosts and stuff, because you don't believe in that. You believe it's brain states. So I am saying, okay, the spiritual feeling, spiritual experience is just a brain state thing. How do you look into brain states that you have? And this is how. When you're having that brain state, when you're having that feeling, right? You look at what's going on and you'll figure out what that feeling is about, what it motivates, what triggers it, right? And if you don't believe in ghosts, then to talk about spirituality is to talk about psychology and animal evolution, right? So all of these atheists, so that's why it's so funny to me that people are resisting it, because somebody that says that's spiritual feeling, that's God plugging into the back of your head. You want to talk about spirituality that way? See, somebody that believes that, their objection is that I'm making it just yet another animal emotion, like hunger and anger and pain. But you all are atheists, so you already think that it's just some feeling like that. But you're scared to talk about it, not you in particular, but many people are scared to talk about it and have a visceral negative reaction. You're using the words wrong. I should use the word spirituality as though it's really about God, that I don't think exists. It can't be about that, because that God does not exist. So it has to be about something tangible. And how do you go back to basics? How do you go down to the Cartesian terminus when it comes to something like this? You say, well, there's a feeling associated with it, and I have experiences when I'm having the feeling. And that's your raw data. So that's what we're doing. I did not say follow these feelings. I will repeat. As a matter of fact, I've been using the example of hunger a lot. We know that hunger is to nutrition in some way. And I want to know the spiritual feeling is to what, as hunger is to nutrition. And we know, I'm not saying, if you want to have nutrition, just follow your hunger. No, because the emotion can be subverted and can become self-destructive, sort of join the enemy side. And I think the reason to sort through this spiritual feeling is because it has long since joined the enemy side. We believe it has to be on that side. And its power over humankind is not going to wane. All right? These spiritual systems hopefully will wane, but its power is not going to wane. So just ignoring it Because it's like, well, we don't want to just do every idea we have when we're feeling that way. Yeah, I agree with that. But if you're going to go, so let's ignore it, I disagree with that. Rationality and reasoning, rationality is about measuring and comparing measurements. That's what rationality means. That is what it means, right? And again, I'm taking from a lexicon that's thousands of years old, not just what they've thought since 1985, not just what some one household in some part. No, in the big picture, this is where rationality comes from and what it means. Ratios, okay, taking measurements and comparing measurements, right? And reasonableness means having a reason, a chain of reasons, right? Having a chain of reasons, right? None of that at all implies that we don't have to deal with our emotions and our feelings. That's primarily all we have to deal with, okay? And I am pretty convinced that the reason this looks like a really powerful feeling is because it is. It is naturally a very powerful feeling. And it has to be coped with. It has to be gotten under control. And that won't be done by ignoring it. It's like if you ignore your lustful feelings and pretend you can just cut them off, that's going to lead to dysfunction. Now, if you listen to them and try to regulate it, but don't try to cap it off. You can regulate the flow. You can use that energy for a lot of things. But if you cap it off, you're going to have an explosion, okay? And I think with spirituality, we basically have this tool play going on, is that some people just try to cap it off and become just as manipulatable as anybody, as somebody that tries to cap off their attraction to the opposite sex can be led around by the nose much more simply, like an ankle can drive them fucking crazy all of a sudden. And we have other people who have been forced to believe that if you want to have a relationship with this feeling, you're going to have to go to this church and give them money and do what the priest says, okay? And those two opposites they do not bode well for a healthy resolution to this for me. And I think a naturalistic middle ground where we have this feeling, and we are suspicious about why it comes, and we are suspicious of the illusions. We know that feelings give us illusions, okay? And in sexual attraction, it gives us illusions that, oh, they're attracted to me too. You find out, no. Oh, she's the one, it must be. There's nobody else for me. These illusions are common with our feelings, with our built-in feelings that the genes have given us or burdened us with, whatever. To deal with it in a healthy way is not to ignore those feelings. It's to be more realistic. It is to apply reasonableness and rationality to them, right? And that's what I hope to accomplish with this system. And having been looking into the spirituality in this way for, I don't know, 30, maybe even 40 years. It goes back longer than my interest in epistemology, at least my conscious interest in epistemology. Now, I think my interest in epistemology is similar. I have some childhood memories that started my philosophical inquiries, and I think some of them could have been called epistemology. But anyway, in my 20s, as this system of relativistic skepticism sort of formed in me, and I used it in my inquiries into things, I have started looking, at spirituality and spiritual feelings this exact way. And it has helped me to deal with them and to remain relatively sane and functional. And to navigate, life. So I have a confidence that that this approach can do that, in my case. And really, what's happened is, I like to talk to people that are into, their own spiritual systems and stuff, and often they think the chakras are doing this and the chi, and they put it down like spirituality has an instruction page, you know, like for an IKEA furniture, you know, like do one, get this, here's your tools. And I don't look at it that way, but I like talking to those people because those people are trying to investigate their spiritual experiences. And in having a conversation with one such person recently, Gary had seen it and just blew up and couldn't handle it. And at that moment, I kind of realized, you know, when people have this explosive, irrational fear of a topic, it's often like it hurts because there's a wound there, you know. The pus needs to be let out of this thing, needs to be cleaned. And I thought, so okay, well, I'll share the methodology by which, you know, I clean my own psychic wounds.